Great. Thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going over one of our development opportunities. This is on Grooville Road, which is near Livingston Manor in the Western Catskills, Sullivan County, getting close to, right on the edge of the western side of Catskills Park and towards the Delaware River Valley. I wanted to actually start this development opportunity a little bit differently as we've started to spend more time at HUTS mapping out kind of the HUTS-averse and looking at where our projects are generally on across Google Maps. And here you can see sort of all the places where there are currently HUTS projects in Idaho and California and now increasingly along the Blue Ridge, up in Wisconsin, along coast in Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. But a kind of core concentration of projects are all here across basically six counties in New York State, across the Catskills and Hudson Valley, with the tightest concentration here around Livingston Manor, and that's where this development opportunity is that we're looking at today. It's also where some of our deepest build partnerships are, and all of the land parcels that we evaluate as part of our development opportunities and Land.NYC, our subscription land service. And so now that we can kind of see that this is really HUTS country that we're talking about with this Grooville project, and a place where we have a very good understanding of zoning conditions, of land use, of construction pricing, of rental conditions, and feel quite confident in the numbers that we're laying out in this development. Let's jump into Grooville Road. And like all of our development opportunities, the way that you get here is head to huts.com, go down to developments, head to see all, and you can sort of view all of these by price point: under 300, 300 to 600, 600 to 900, 900 to 1.2 million. We give a synopsis of who each development opportunity is for, the level of difficulty we see in it, the total costs on capital expenditure, so between acquisition and construction and land improvements, the value, the equity we see being produced at the tail end of the project. And then if a goal of yours is short-term rental or rental at all, what we see as the monthly revenue opportunity. And because we're dealing with developments here, we want to make sure that your development, that it what we call pencils, that the math works on the pro forma on the project, that the value created is going to be more than the cost in, and that the cash flow or the rental projection is going to be significantly more than your carrying costs. And so let's take a look at Grooville Road and how well that fits into that program. So here we are looking at Grooville Road. This is a 9-acre parcel and happens to be a place that I visited last week. It has some really interesting topography, really great wooded lot, opportunity for ridgeline views and some strategic clearing to get some wider perspective from the top of the parcel. And so what we're laying out here on this 9-acre parcel is a place that's optimized for rental. We are thinking about laying out kind of 2 units on the parcel. Both are minibar standard, sort of a smaller standard, along with an accessory dwelling, and a total cost between acquisition and construction of around $510,000. We anticipate being able to produce about 30% in stored equity, or around $150,000 of value, and a conservative rental rate of around $8,000 a month. So like all of our projects, we try to kind of lay out a vision of like, what is this place really about? For us, this place is really about kind of being surrounded by the forest, being kind of up on a plateau in this parcel. It's a place that in the winter you're going to get some of these ridgeline views, and might even want to build this snowman we see here on the right. And so who do we see this being for? This is sort of a development opportunity that could be for anyone, but seems like a really good fit for the way that we've laid it out for a couple, with sort of an entrepreneurial perspective on this parcel, that they're looking at how to have a place that they can utilize that's quite small, but is really an excellent kind of flexible rental property, with an additional accessory dwelling that's kind of primarily geared towards rental and the high ROI that we see with our accessory dwellings. To place this project again, here we are. This is Sullivan County. We're sort of towards the Central County, off Route 17, a little bit west towards the Delaware River. If you don't know the area, it's one of our favorites in the Catskills. The lot itself is a triangular lot that has road frontage on two sides, and I'll get into why I think that's interesting and important in this parcel, and why it opens up some opportunities that we haven't even laid out here, for subdivision and additional uses. There's a really great mix of things happening on this parcel. Like I said, there's elevation change, it's thickly wooded. Yeah, the lot kind of reaches almost 2,000 feet of elevation, and so it's always going to be sort of a little bit cooler. Going to get cooler in the summer. Really exceptional kind of fireworks autumn display, and going to have kind of a longer winter season with kind of snow earlier in the season and later in the season. There's also a brook that runs through the parcel, which I believe ultimately leads to the Willowwemoc. And the Willowwemoc is one of the sort of like original American trout fishing streams, quite famous for as a trout fishery in America. So our proposition here is that you would purchase the lot. The parcel is listed for $85,000, which at 9 acres is just under $10,000 an acre, which for a relatively raw parcel like this is a price point that I find certainly more than acceptable as a starting point for this project. And there's a couple of things that I want to look at here on this lot. There's two road frontages. So this is Davenport Road that you see along the right-hand side of the fork, Grooville on the other. And you see that you've got basically like, a whole side of the triangle with direct access to Grooville. So there's sort of like a natural path up that already exists off of Grooville Road. But you also have two pieces of road frontage off of Davenport Hill, which when you're looking at subdivisibility, if that's one of the goals, it's always easier to get this done if the new lot that you create isn't an island, that it has its own road frontage. And so that's an opportunity that we see here, to even split off into two additional lots to give yourself 3 parcels in total. Starting from step 1, you would have acquired this lot. You can see it's thickly tree covered, minimal neighbors, and you also have the elevation change where you're not really going to see any neighbors. You're going to kind of like be seeing over the valley on both sides, over their roof lines. And here we're sort of laying out our pro forma. And for anyone who's sort of new to reviewing our development opportunities or the idea of land development at all, a pro forma is the kind of math that lays out the 3 things that really matter in 3 or 4 things that really matter in development. What's your acquisition costs? What are your improvement costs? What are your construction costs? What are your maintenance costs? And then what are your revenue projections? And what we're going to show here is each of the columns as we anticipate this development opportunity unfolding. So what you would do first here is acquire the lot. Let's say you get it for $85,000. Ideally, we can work with the seller to bring the price down a little bit. In this case, we're showing that you would engage HUTS for some due diligence on helping to support looking at the survey, land engineering, a perk test for the septic, and just confirming that everything that we imagine doing on the parcel is 100% feasible before you close on the lot. Then you would move into site planning and land improvement. And so what you see here is a driveway routing where we're kind of laying out a driveway that takes a straight shot up to the top plateau of the parcel, crosses a small stream here. There's an existing crossing there, and then forks off to give you 2 locations, one for your initial primary house and another for future or upfront accessory dwellings. And so that these can be separate enough from each other that if you do have the idea to rent this place, when you could have multiple parties staying on the parcel and really have no interaction with each other, where they really feel kind of private from one another. Or if you're utilizing either the main house or the accessory dwellings for yourself, your renters have a separate space. And so laying out the driveway right up front gives us that separation a few hundred feet between them. And we're also sort of identifying the notion that we want to strategically clear the lot and not clear cut the place, but how do you create that sort of meandering driveway through, which really feels sort of like a magical arrival to each of these destinations, and keeping the tree cover between the two or the multiple structures as sort of a privacy guard and a way to make the space between them feel even more vast. We're also showing here this idea of creating sort of a walking path that for the accessory dwellings, you would have a parking area, and then you walk a little bit to the ADU. This is an approach that we've applied to a number of our developments to really kind of like ramp up the magic on taking a little bit of a walk through the forest to arrive at this accessory dwelling and kind of to be able to see the kind of warm beacon of this lit ADU kind of in the forest and not feel like you're kind of driving straight up and high beaming it with your car. Okay, so next step, land improvement. So you're going to have a series of land improvements here. You're going to have to go through the tree clearing that we identified, driveway, which could be a little bit longer than this, than laid out here, but you have to build a driveway, well, and septic. Our goal would be that we'd maximize the distance that one well can service two structures and one septic can service multiple structures so that we don't have to build multiples of those pieces of infrastructure. And during this part of the project, you would be engaged with HUTS on site planning and groundwork coordination and kind of getting all those folks in place to both permit and execute on the improvements on the project. So at this point, you've purchased the lot. You've gone through due diligence on the lot, you've improved the lot, and you've spent around $150,000 on the parcel. But you've also significantly de-risked this parcel. You've made this important move in land development, going from a raw lot to an improved lot, and that has value. And so, because you've made the project more and more shovel ready, and so you've gone from about $10,000 per raw acre into something closer to like 20, somewhere around $23,000 per acre for an improved lot. And so that's reflected in what we call the value created column at the end. And so we're sort of showing that you have 150 grand in, but we think you've generated around $75,000 of stored equity in the project. Okay. And so the next phase here is maybe a little bit different of an approach than you might think of an accessory dwelling. Often the idea is, well, let me build my house and then I'll build the accessory structure or the guest house. More and more, we're seeing a lot of benefit in starting with that. You kind of design and permit for everything that you want to do, but you build and start construction or start financing the accessory dwellings first. And the reason for that is, well, there's a few reasons. The first is it gives you a place to stay or a way to turn on the faucet on your revenue on your property more quickly. That the accessory dwellings are always going to take less time to build and execute, and in some cases can be completely prefabricated than a main house. And so the way that you might be able to get the ADU up and running within, a few months, the main house going to take a half year or so, or maybe even a little bit more. And so you kind of save yourself a full season plus of being able to start to create a traction on your rental on the property and starting to have the property pay for itself to contribute to the carrying of its own costs. And so it's a bit of a strategic take that we're seeing as being beneficial more and more, particularly if you're able to, say, finance the ADU out of pocket rather than going for a construction loan. And you're kind of delivering more and more value into the lot and using that to help finance the future main house. And so that's what we're laying out here in phase 2, that you would build that little cottage. We're laying out the idea that you would have, it could be off grid, like a number of structures that we have with one of our runoff of solar and cistern and other kind of water collection methods. So you don't even have to wait for infrastructure to be in place. And then you kind of sprinkle some outdoor rooms around that becomes an extension of the livable experience on the lot. It's not just sort of one of our little cottages in place. It's a little cottage plus a large outdoor living room and a kind of covered kind of dining area that, while not interior and not conditioned space, still feels like an extension of the home and is built for a fraction of the cost. So moving on to the next phase. So now you have your lot, you've improved your lot, and you've built an ADU on the parcel for somewhere around $75,000. You've built some other amenities in, whether it's a sauna or an outdoor kitchen, and you've worked with HUTS on the design and development of implementing that first accessory dwelling structure. And so at this point, you'd have around $250,000 in the project, but now the value machine is really turning on because not only do you have an improved lot, but you have built a structure on it that is rentable, mortgageable, and you have also entitled the lot with permitting for the main house. And so it's a very, very shovel-ready parcel with a lot of usability and value embedded in it. So at this point, we see you would have generated about $100,000 of stored equity, and we're starting to get into being able to project monthly revenue as well. And then the last piece is to build what we call sort of our mini bar. It's our smallest standard, 1 bedroom plus a flexible loft, often used to kind of bunk out the loft space so that you could sleep 4 or 6 comfortably, but it's a place that wouldn't feel strange for just a couple to rent. And so our last piece here is to build that space. That it's a 650 square foot, 1.5 bedroom home that is going to be built for around $275, $300 a square foot for the shell of the home, and around $100 per square foot on the fixtures and finishes, with some variability based on how we choose to execute this with you. But at this point, you're putting around $260,000 into building that additional structure and working with HUTS on the design and permitting and construction management of that piece of it. So now you have the little cottage, you have the mini bar, you have 2 separate rental properties essentially running in one location, or 2 separate structures that, if you want to use it for yourself, could be one is your primary location and the other is overflow for family and friends. But you've spent around $500,000 at this point on the land, the improvements, design and development services, and construction. And we feel pretty confident saying that you've produced around $150,000 of value at this point. And then looking at the rental math, what you see here is a relatively conservative estimate, but let's say you are renting the ADU for 20 nights a month and $200 a night annualized throughout the year. You're going to have a little bit of seasonal variability. It should produce around $4,000 a month. And on the mini bar, with the option to kind of rent it to both couples, but also up to kind of families and even up to groups of 6, we see it renting at a annualized rate of around $325 a night, and a quite conservative occupancy rate of around 16 nights per month. It's also assuming that if you were the owner, you're using it a few weekends a month and kind of digging into the potential usability, and producing around $9,200 gross per month, which equates to around $110,000 in annual revenue. And so for anyone out there that's a real estate investor or has looked at kind of cash on cash math or other ways of or IRR or other ways of evaluating the viability of a rental property, these are sort of the bones of how to plug into your spreadsheet or your equation to see if it fits your mark. But from my perspective, this is a very, very compelling development opportunity, both mathematically and economically, but also just pure beauty and location. Great part of the world with a lot of demand on it, with great natural amenities nearby and fantastic towns within spitting distance. And so this is sort of the full property, and in the end, with a mini bar, ADU improvements, and that's kind of how we see developing this place. Let me open it up to Q&A. I see some questions are starting to fold in, and let me field these as best I can. Before jumping into these, anyone who is interested in this development opportunity, please go to the Grooville Road development opportunity, fill out the form at the bottom with your name, email, and phone. We'll be in touch absolutely as soon as possible to set up a time to discuss this project with you, what our scope looks like, and what the next steps would be to move forward with this development. So Alex writes, are the estimate costs for program outdoor kitchen sauna showing soft and hard projected costs? In this case, we're kind of folding the hard costs in with the construction costs of some of the soft costs are going to be baked into the land improvement. So for like land clearing and grading to create that outdoor area. And some of the soft costs for the constructed pieces are kind of folded into the same time frame of constructing the ADU. And so when you're doing the ADU, you would also kind of like assemble the sauna as part of that project. Alex writes, how many livable rentable dwellings can you build on the full lot? As it stands, you can do a main house and accessory dwelling. But again, one of the things I think is really exciting about this parcel, which you can see in this kind of sketch site plan, is that you have road frontage on Grooville, and we're really only using 4.5 acres max in this development proposal. I do see an opportunity to break off a 2.5 acre lot here and a 2.5 acre lot here, both of which would have road frontage on a Davenport Road. And each of those resulting parcels would be able to also support a main house and an ADU or an accessory apartment. Matthew writes, how long would you say this development would be from selecting the land to the completed ADU? And then from ADU to primary build being completed? I would say there's a little bit of variability based on weather and winter time, but I think a really good kind of organizing principle is to say, how do we, like my goal would be to get the ADU in place within sort of 4 to 6 months and get the full property in place within 9 to 12 months. Alex writes, what is involved on separating a lot like that? A couple things. So ultimately, to walk through a subdivision as described, you will present a sketch plan from a licensed surveyor, and we're in an area where we kind of know all the surveyors and also know the town planning board. That gets submitted to the planning board for review based on what we would like to do and where we propose putting new infrastructure. The town will come back with notes and requests. Could be they want to, if there's going to be a shared road, a road maintenance agreement. If it's going to be a driveway that feels sort of overly steep, they might want to see a civil engineer's report. But again, because there's so much road frontage here, a lot of that likely isn't required here. This is a lot that feels kind of ready-made for subdivision. And so after that sketch plan, they'll look for a formal plan. The town planning board will either have additional notes or they will send it to what's called a public hearing, where they notify the public nearby that a proposal is in place to change the tax lots nearby. Maybe some people come by and have questions. Maybe they don't. This is a very tame subdivision. We're not looking for 100 lots or some kind of crazy, kind of suburban subdivision. And so it's a very reasonable proposal. And so you would expect that the subdivision gets done within sort of 3 to 4 months from the initial sketch proposal. Sarah writes, possible to add more structures that can be short-term rental. Not on this one lot, but you could on if you go through this subdivision. You may have the opportunity, I'd have to double check on the zoning for this exact lot, to have a garage with with sort of like an in-law suite or an accessory apartment. So that would really give you 3 rentable structures in one location. Hopefully this was helpful, both to look at this opportunity and the way that we think about development opportunities generally, and the way that we kind of work with our clients overall. In a lot of ways, the development opportunities are us just kind of giving a bit of a shortcut to the thinking that we provide to our service clients, that they'll come to us with a lot and we'll go through a similar exercise. In this case, we're just saying, here's a lot, here are the standards, here's the way we would develop it, and here's the finances as we understand it. And if this sort of jives with your objectives and your goals, this is a bit of a shortcut to work with us on implementing this design and this development approach. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and looking forward to hearing from you if you're interested in pursuing this development opportunity or any others.